Hi, my name is Victoria Chapman. I'm a creative artist specializing in colorful illustration, writing, and music. One of my favorite mediums for illustration is watercolors. I love how washy and how colorful I can make them. I love the watery elements. It's one of my favorite things about it. And today I'm going to show you how to stretch watercolor paper so you have a nice flat surface to work on. This will prevent your paper from becoming bubbly and wavy, and it makes it stretch out nice and flat, and then you won't have to worry about it the whole time you're working. So I'm going to start by showing you now what materials we need. So here you can see all of the materials you need to get your watercolor paper stretched on a flat surface for your work. The first thing you obviously need is paper. I buy large sheets of paper. I find them to be a nicer quality than the kind you can get in pads. This particular one is Fabriano 300-pound hot-pressed bright white paper. It's a little pricier, but I find the results are worth it. I myself am a big fan of hot-pressed paper because it's flat. It doesn't have the texture that cold-pressed paper has, and that's the kind of look I'm going for with my work. But this method will work for cold-pressed as well. So here's a sheet. Next thing you're going to want is a metal-edged ruler. This is something that's going to help you rip your sheet down to the size that you need. You could, in theory, cut it too, but I find you can get a nice, straighter edge if you just use a flat surface to help you rip it. So I'll show that to you as well. There's the surface that you're going to be stapling it on. This is my very well-loved board. You can see it has a lot of staple holes and paint on it at this point. I've had this board for almost 20 years. And it's held up quite well over the years. So what you'll want to look for is a metal-edged hollow drawing board, or lightweight drawing board is what they might call it. You can see it's got a metal edge here. It takes a couple pieces of wood and puts them together. It's hollow in the center. And this makes it a great surface for stapling on because it's not so solid that you can't get the staples through. But it also holds the paper on well enough. So this is actually a really great surface to work on. I would highly recommend this. Otherwise, you can use another piece of flat wood or some sort of flat surface that you can easily staple into. And you can find these boards at a number of art supply stores, including dickblick.com. But I would also encourage you to ask around at your local art stores too, because I highly encourage supporting local businesses. The next thing you'll want is your staple gun. This is very important. This is what is going to attach your paper to the board. You don't need a giant heavy-duty staple gun like a construction contractor might have, but a smaller one like this works well. This takes 5/16 of an inch or 8mm staples, so you can look for that. Another thing you'll want is a flathead screwdriver. This is going to be for when you remove the paper afterwards when you're done with your work. This will be to pry the staples out. Of course, you also need a source of water. So make sure you have a space where you can adequately put your paper in the water without getting it dirty or messed up. Basin sinks are great. Kitchen sinks are great. Or if you have a really big piece, a bathtub works as well. You could also have a big tub to soak the paper in, to just put it in the water, but you can also run it under the faucet. All right, so first I'm going to show you getting your paper down to the proper size. I already split this page in half by tearing it. You can see how it has this kind of nice straight edge here, but it has that little bit of a torn edge, but that's okay because it actually kind of matches the manufacturing edge. So I'm going to take one of these half pieces and I'm going to fold it down again and split it in half because the piece I want to work on, I don't need paper quite this big. So first you'll line up your edges, or your corners, to make sure you're getting this as straight as possible. This is fairly thick paper, so it takes a little bit of work to flatten this out. We'll push that down like so. And I like to use my fingernails to kind of just press along the edge here to flatten it out real good on this crease. And then I flip it over and do it again. Flip it the other side. And just keep doing this until it feels very well creased. This is going to make it a lot easier to rip. Go. Almost done. We're going to take our metal edge ruler. You might want a longer one too if you're going to be ripping really large pieces, but this ruler is sufficient for what I'm doing right now. You'll line up the metal edge with your crease on one side. You can kind of see the crease on the opposite side here, and then you're gonna take your paper and hold your ruler down really well so it doesn't slip, and just gently start to tear along the edge of that crease where the ruler is. And just keep gently tearing down. You don't want to go too fast because you could tear it in the wrong direction, so just be careful about how you're tearing. Keep tearing all the way down until you reach the end, and there we go. We have 2 even pieces of paper. All right, so now you want to take your paper to your sink or tub or wherever you're going to wet your paper. It's really important that wherever you're doing this, it's clean, because you don't want to accidentally brush your paper up against some soap or food gunk or whatever. So make sure your area is clean before you do this. And you'll want to have some really lukewarm water. That kind of just helps soften the paper a little more. What you're going to want to do is just fully soak your paper. And like I said, you can use, if you have a big tub that you can put water in, you can then just like slide your paper in and dip it, and that's an effective way to do it. But if not, you can also just run it under the tap. Sometimes the tub tap works better if you have really large sheets, but you just want to make sure your paper gets fully saturated on both sides. I'm going to flip it over. Make sure every bit of the surface gets wet. Paper nice and wet. You'll start to feel it soften in your hands as you do this. This is one of the things I like about having thicker paper, is that as it softens, it gets a little flimsy, so having the thicker paper makes it a little easier to handle. You'll just want to let that drip off a little bit in your sink before you bring it over to your board. All right, so now I've got my wet paper here, and I'm gonna pick where I want to place this. So you want to just kind of flatten that out on your board, and then you take your staple gun, and if you've ever, say, changed a tire or tightened a drum head — I used to be a drummer in high school, and you had to do this, tighten your lug nuts — you do it in a certain order. So you kind of want to go opposite side to side with it. So I'm going to start with this corner here. And then I'm going down to this corner, and then I'll go up to the top again and to the bottom, and then just kind of go back and forth around like this until eventually you have enough staples in there to kind of have it evenly stretch out. And now we are all stapled. You can see how the paper is already getting a little warped looking like that with the wavies. Don't worry, as it dries, that will start to stretch and flatten out, and that is what the purpose of the staples is to hold it in place so that it eventually stretches out. And if you are in a hurry and you don't want to wait for this to air dry, you can use a hair dryer or a heat gun, an air blowing heat gun, and that will dry it out faster. All right, so I've got my heat gun. Just be careful not to get this too close to your paper. And I'm gonna put this on, and this will eventually get dried out and stretch out flat. All right, so now you can see after I use the heat gun that my surface is nice and flat. Paper's dry now, and it's ready for me to use. So this will keep it flat for you through your whole work time, and that is fantastic. All right, so I'm just going to show you removing staples. This is an old piece of paper I have on this board that I'm just going to remove because I'm not going to use it. So take your flathead screwdriver. You might want to have a dedicated flathead screwdriver that you just keep with your equipment so that you're not searching for it later. This is my dedicated painting screwdriver. So you want to go away from the work because if you slip at all, you don't want your screwdriver to scrape into your work. That's bad. Ask me how I know. So go ahead and pop your screwdriver under and just kind of wiggle a little bit, and eventually the staple will start to pop out, and you can just pull it out the rest of the way with your fingers. And this is the most effective way to get your paper out, I found. don't try a staple remover. They really don't work well for this, and they tend to tear up your paper. So you don't want that. And so just do this all the way around your surface. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this video on how to stretch watercolor paper. It's one of my favorite techniques for getting me started on the page that I learned from a dear professor of mine when I was back in college, Coraline. So thank you, Coraline. For more, you can visit my website at www.wayakindesigns.com.